Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Wednesday, March 20th, 2019, and today we're going to be looking at 3 new polls out for the Democratic primary. And overall, this is just going to be an analysis of the newest numbers out, and it does show some interesting results. Now, we start off with the morning consult poll because it gives the least amount of information. Then we're going to move over into the Emerson poll and move over to the CNN poll, and then finish off with the Emerson poll. If you hadn't checked Real Clear Politics, it essentially just shows that Joe Biden has led by 8% in 2 national polls, and then the most recent poll has a tie with Bernie Sanders. Now, the tie is probably one of the closest polls that we're going to see for right now. It's probably going to end up going back into a Joe Biden lead, or a narrow lead, depending on the pollster, but it's probably going to end up with the Joe Biden lead as of right now. Again, Joe Biden has not announced his run for president. That's not something that we have yet. So there are some people who may be, not throwing their support to him in the poll because they don't exactly know if he's going to run or not. That may end up doing so, just like what happened with Bernie Sanders when he announced. He definitely got a little bit of a boost there. Now, looking at all of these numbers, it's pretty interesting to see, I guess you could say how they've changed over time, meaning that they pretty much haven't. Joe Biden has consistently led with Bernie Sanders in the second place. But one interesting thing is that Beto O'Rourke could very well come take Kamala Harris's spot. Now, some people do argue Beto O'Rourke is a progressive. I do not personally think he is. I definitely see him turning into more of the establishment Democrat type. I really think Beto O'Rourke supporters are going to end up going to Joe Biden. I definitely see that happening. Although a lot of Bernie Sanders supporters, they may not claim Beto O'Rourke as progressive, they claim as voters, and I just do not see that happening. But again, based off this morning consult poll, Joe Biden leads, a +4 increase from last week, now leading again by 8%, and then it goes down to Kamala Harris at 8%, then Beto O'Rourke at 8%, Elizabeth Warren at 7%, Cory Booker at 4%, and then it gets down to the 2s and 1 percentage points. And now in the early voting states, this is even better news for Joe Biden because now it's an 11-point lead compared to an 8-point lead nationwide. Iowa, New Hampshire, South Carolina, and Nevada, Joe Biden leads by 11 points. Pretty interesting, though, how Bernie Sanders already has a pretty good stake in a number of these states. Probably coming out of Iowa, New Hampshire, South Carolina, and Nevada are probably going to be a little bit better for Joe Biden. And then again, goes down to single digits for the third and so on candidates in this poll. Looking at the favorability ratings, Joe Biden right now still with the largest approval rating amongst any Democrat, Bernie Sanders with the second. And then I believe, it does go down to Warren, Harris, Beto O'Rourke, Booker, and then down to the no names, even though they're not really no names based off us, because we know them because we look at political things all the time. Not everyone knows who Pete Buttigieg is or Steve Bullock. I mean, I wouldn't know who Steve Bullock is if I didn't have this channel, to be completely honest with you. And although a lot of these people may be senators, governors, it does not necessarily mean that they are already known nationwide. They sure are known in their state. Their state isn't 360 million people. But looking at the favorability ratings, I think this is a pretty good sign for Joe Biden. He can only go down from here. Ideologies, again, it hasn't really changed since last week. Biden voters are typically more, I guess you could say, moderate than Bernie Sanders, even though Bernie Sanders and him have roughly the same amount. The one thing that's a little bit striking is that all the other candidates have above 15%. For very liberal voters, Biden has less than 12%. Even all Democratic primary voters are 16%, so he's under everyone else. And he's on average with the liberal rating, on average with the slightly liberal, and a little bit more with moderates, and a little bit more with conservatives. Now, we're not going to talk much about the GOP primary. Same results, just Donald Trump looking a little bit better. He really does not have that much of competition. Now, moving over to the CNN poll, showing the exact same results, showing the Joe Biden in the lead for right now. The first thing I want to talk about is the favorability rating. Donald Trump's still unfavorable. I don't think there was any point where he was approved of by this poll here, except for in 2005. Besides that, let's go ahead and look at the favorability ratings. Pretty much match up with what we see. 8% approval rating doesn't mean he's only approved by 8%. It just means that not everyone knows him. I'm sure that number would go up if everyone knew who he was. Now for Bernie Sanders, it's 46 to 43. That's interesting. 46 to 43. Again, he's flaunted as the most popular politician nationwide. Those Senate approval rating polls are taken within your state, meaning that, of course, Vermont voters love him. They literally love him. That doesn't mean that he's popular nationwide. Keep that in mind. Beto O'Rourke, some people still haven't heard of him. That's pretty interesting. I don't see Joe Biden on here. Actually, it's continued, so that means it must be down here. Actually, I guess not. That's pretty weird. But let's go ahead and look at, scroll down here and go ahead and take a look at the, not so much the issues. That's not super important. Now, respondents who are Democrats as Democrat leading independents, because some states do have open seats. Which Democrats do they support? Now, let's take a look at October of 2018. Joe Biden led by 20%. And then he led by 16%, and now he leads by 8%. So it does seem like Bernie Sanders is catching up there, but Bernie Sanders has officially announced, and obviously that brought over some voters. Kamala Harris has definitely improved from 4% to 12%. Beto O'Rourke went from 9% to 11%, 4% to 11%, really. Warren went from 3% to 6%, actually went down from October, which is pretty interesting. Some of these numbers, Michael Bloomberg was at 4% at one point, now he's at 0%. Really not that much change with other candidates. The only ones really are either improving by 2 percentage points or going down. And again, not much to see here. Again, Bernie Sanders behind Joe Biden, but Joe Biden still leading by 8%, which I do think is pretty interesting. One thing I want to see is who would be your second choice. So 14% of people say Joe Biden, meaning that's not their first choice. So let's say their candidate drops out. That would lead to Joe Biden having 14% on top of 28%. Same thing with Bernie Sanders. 17% of people say he's their second choice. So, he would jump up 17 plus 20, putting him at 37. Joe Biden would be at 42. So that's pretty interesting looking at the second choice results. And right here, actually, I think that this is a pretty interesting question. Which is more important to you personally for Democratic and Democratic-leaning independents? A Democratic candidate who has a strong chance at beating Donald Trump, or is one that shares your political issues? 56% strong chance at beating Donald Trump. This is where I do think that Joe Biden is going to do a little bit better, because if we scroll down, they actually asked that question. Who would have a better chance with Joe Biden? 51% of people say that they would have a better chance with Joe Biden. 33% would say with Bernie Sanders. 56% say with someone else, and 36% say with someone else for Joe Biden. So it seems like Joe Biden, again, seems like he's running that electability card. He's not personally, but the mainstream media is definitely playing into that. That's exactly what Hillary Clinton won on back in 2016. And again, even though she did lose, it doesn't mean that they're not going to choose Joe Biden this time around. But it doesn't also mean that Bernie Sanders won't get chosen either, just based off these poll numbers. It's just pretty interesting that we're seeing pretty near repeat from what we saw before. But the Emerson poll does hold some interesting results. Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders are at an exact tie nationwide, give or take 4.4%, which means that Bernie Sanders actually could be leading. I do think that this one is, a little bit different because, number one, if we're looking at the Trump versus Biden general election matchup versus the Trump versus Sanders matchup, Sanders gets 51% of the vote to Trump's 49%. Biden gets 55 to 45. That's weird. That should not be happening. If there is a tie in the Democratic primary, and then all of a sudden in the general election, there's a drastic difference between two candidates that are top two names for the Democratic Party. That's weird. It's weird that Harris leads more over Trump than Sanders. And one thing that strikes out to me is Trump versus O'Rourke. Trump is actually ahead of Beto O'Rourke. That is something that I did not expect, considering that Beto O'Rourke's third place. Warren is not. And Biden, 55 to 45, that's some pretty interesting results. Now, they also include Howard Schultz. Howard Schultz definitely needs to be included for this reason. If they throw out Beto O'Rourke, Howard Schultz gets 10% of the vote. That's a very large amount. That's more than Gary Johnson and Jill Stein got together back in 2016. I don't even think Gary Johnson broke 5% in 2016. And Howard Schultz, yes, he has the money to stay in the race. He has the money to get on the ballot. He just needs fundraising and poll numbers to get on the presidential debates. And what does he have here? Poll numbers. You need to reach a certain threshold. Yes, it is 15%, but you can sort of get there. Actually, I think the new rules may have changed to a point where a lot of candidates can get on there. I don't know if that's true or not. You guys probably know, so comment it down below. But Howard Schultz at 10%, that's not the worst thing. Even against Joe Biden, 4%. That's more than what Gary Johnson got. So, again, that's pretty interesting. One thing that jumps out again, Donald Trump does lead Beto O'Rourke with Howard Schultz in the race. Joe Biden still leads Donald Trump with Howard Schultz in the race by 8%. That's pretty interesting. But looking at the general election polls, they don't really match up with what we're seeing in the Democratic primary polls, but I do think that it's pretty interesting how Bernie Sanders and Joe Biden are tied. Again, like I said before, better work very well could be coming for Kamala Harris's place at 11% now only 1% away. If you go to some other polls, it may not necessarily agree with that based off their data, but it's pretty interesting how he's pretty much inching up there. So that pretty much wraps up today's video. It's pretty much a rise and fall for Joe Biden, and with better work coming up and possibly coming into third place. That pretty much wraps up today's video. Thank you guys for watching this video. Comment down suggestions below, and I will see you all tomorrow.